and something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. "Welcome to our wedding, everyone," she said. The bride never showed up to her own wedding, but she was already in the building, planning something no one expected. 500 guests filled the grand ballroom of Lagos's most prestigious hotel. The lilies were imported. The cake cost 3 million naira. The groom, Daniel, stood at the altar in a custom suit, adjusting his cufflinks for the 10th time in 5 minutes. He looks like a man who had everything, but the one thing he needed most right now, his best man, Toby, had been missing for 45 minutes, and none of his calls were going through. The priest was whispering impatiently. Daniel's mother, wrapped in gold-threaded asoebi in the front row, kept throwing him glances that mixed worry with warning. The videographers kept rolling because they were paid to. Daniel kept smiling because he had no other choice. This was the wedding of the year. Everything was perfect, and something was deeply, catastrophically wrong. Then the lights went out. Not all of them, just the chandeliers, slowly, dramatically, like a theater about to begin its final act. The massive LED screens that had been playing a romantic slideshow of Daniel and Funke's pre-wedding photos flickered and went black. A woman in the third row laughed nervously and whispered to her husband that this must be a surprise entrance for the bride.
This is the dramatic pause, I'm sure.
I hope you're right.
Everyone leaned forward. Everyone expected something beautiful. What they got instead made a woman scream loud enough to stop every heartbeat in the room. The scream had come back to life, but it wasn't showing Zanzibar's sunsets or Paris rooftops. It was showing a basement, dark walls, peeling paint, a single harsh light swinging overhead like something out of a crime scene. And in the middle of the frame, tied to a heavy wooden chair, bruised and gagged with duct tape, was Toby. His tuxedo shirt was torn at the collar. His eyes were wide and darting at something just off camera. A gloved hand moved into the frame, adjusting the phone, and then a voice came through the hotel's expensive sound system, calm, cold, and instantly recognizable to every single person in that room. It was Funke. "Welcome to our wedding, everyone," she said. Not a tremor, not a crack, just ice. "I know you came here expecting a bride, but today we're going to do something different. Today, we're going to talk about the truth." Daniel felt the marble floor tilt beneath him. The sweat on his forehead turned cold. He looked at the screen, then at the exit, then back at the screen, a man calculating 1,000 escape routes while standing completely still. 500 people turned from the image of Toby's bruised face to look directly at him. The cameras kept rolling. "I spent 5 years of my life building a future with a man I thought I knew. I was there when his firm nearly collapsed. I stayed up through his night terrors. I was his rock, his alibi, his cover story. And the whole time, every single day, the man standing next to him at this altar was not just his best friend." She paused for exactly long enough to make the silence unbearable. He was the man Daniel was actually in love with. The collective gasp that followed was physical. You could feel it move through the room like a wave. In conservative circles of Lagos high society, the accusation didn't just land, it detonated. Phones appeared, whispers turned into full conversations. Daniel's father, a broad-shouldered man in the front row, gripped the back of the seat in front of him so hard his knuckles went pale. Funke wasn't finished. "Daniel, you have exactly 10 minutes. The police have been tipped off about a disturbance at this hotel, but they're not coming for me yet. They're coming for the truth. I have a second video. You and Toby 3 weeks ago at that apartment in Ikoyi you called your business meeting. If you step to that microphone right now and tell everyone the truth, I will tell you exactly where Toby is and let him walk free. I leave him there, and by the time anyone finds that basement, it will be too late. The choice is yours. Is your reputation worth more than the life of the man you claim to love?" The screen went black. The silence that followed was the kind that makes people forget how to breathe. Daniel stood alone at the altar, the white floral arrangement now looking less like a celebration and more like a burial. The clock on the wall began to tick. 4 minutes gone, 6 minutes left. Daniel's mind was a war zone. He looked at his father, who was staring straight ahead with the rigid posture of a man refusing to believe what his ears had just heard. He looked at Funke's father, a retired judge who had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. He looked at the guests recording on their phones, the footage already guaranteed to be everywhere by morning. He thought about his career, his contracts, the deals that would evaporate overnight if the wrong headline ran. He thought about everything he had spent 15 years building in this city. Then he thought about Toby.
He thought about the first time he had told Toby the truth, back in their final year at the University of Lagos, sitting on a concrete step outside the faculty building at 2 in the morning. He thought about Toby's response, not shock, not disgust, just a quiet, steady, "I know, I've always known." He thought about the years that followed, the bro trips that were actually the only weeks of the year either of them felt like themselves, the long calls at midnight, the way Toby had quietly, patiently, invisibly rearranged his entire life to remain close to a man who kept asking him to wait. And Daniel had kept asking him to wait for 5 years while planning a wedding with another person. Now Toby was in a basement, or at least that was what Funke wanted him to believe. Whether it was real or not, Daniel realized something that hit him harder than any accusation on that screen. He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know whether the woman he had spent 5 years lying to was capable of real violence. That was what 5 years of systematic deception had created. A woman so transformed by betrayal that he could no longer predict what she would or wouldn't do. And that was entirely his fault. 5 minutes gone, he gripped the microphone stand. The metal rattled. He looked at the black screen. He looked at the exit. And then slowly, like a man walking into a fire he had spent years lighting, he looked at the priest and shook his head. He wasn't getting married today. He walked to the microphone. His hand was shaking so badly the stand knocked against the stage floor, and the sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. "I cannot lie anymore," he said. The room went so still you could hear the air conditioning. "Funke is right." Daniel's voice cracked, but he kept going, staring at the black screen like he was speaking directly to her. "Everything she said is true. Toby is not just my best man. He is the person I have loved since we were 20 years old. I was afraid. I was a coward. I wanted the career, the reputation, the picture-perfect Lagos life, and I used the 2 people I cared about most to build it. I lied to Funke every single day for 5 years. I let her plan a future I knew was a lie. I let Toby believe we were waiting together for a day that I was never actually working toward." He paused. His voice dropped. "I destroyed 2 people. Not Funke, not circumstance, me. Please, Funke, wherever you are, I've said it. Take everything else. Just let him go." The confession hit the room like a wrecking ball. Daniel's father stood, straightened his agbada, and walked out. A trail of relatives followed, heads down, not looking at anyone. Others stayed, unable to move, watching a man dismantle himself in real time on the most public stage the city had to offer. Then the side door near the altar swung open. The guests spun toward it, half expecting police, half expecting something worse. Instead, Toby walked through. He was limping slightly. His face was bruised, exactly as it had appeared on the screen, but he was untied, unguarded, and walking on his own. The room erupted in confused murmuring. And then, 2 steps behind him, came Funke. No weapon, no wedding gown, just a black jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, holding a digital tablet with the steady hands of a woman who had been planning this day for a long time. She walked straight to the altar. She stood in front of Daniel and looked at him the way a judge looks at someone before sentencing, not with hatred, but with the quiet, total certainty of someone who has already won. "She was never in a basement," she said into the microphone. "Toby was in the bridal suite upstairs the whole time. He helped me make the video." The room took a moment to catch up with what it had just heard. Funke turned to look at Toby, then back at Daniel, letting the new truth settle over the ballroom like dust after a building collapses.
"I didn't have to kidnap him," she said. "I just had to show him something. Something you sent last month to a woman in Abuja, the one you were quietly arranging a second secret life with for after the wedding." She let that land. "You weren't only lying to me, Daniel, you are lying to him too. Toby was not your forbidden love. He was your most loyal audience. And you were already rehearsing your next performance before this one even opened." Daniel turned to look at Toby, and for the first time all morning, his expression wasn't fear or calculation. It was something rawer, shame. Toby spoke quietly, almost to himself. "She came to me last night. She showed me the messages. I thought we were waiting together, waiting for the right time to stop pretending. But you were already looking for the next person to hide behind. I agreed to the video because I wanted to know if you would choose me when it actually cost you something. And you did. But only because there was nothing left to lose." He paused. "That's not love, Daniel. That's just math." Funke addressed the guests one final time. Her voice was composed, precise. "There is no wedding today. There is no marriage. Every kobo spent on this event came from my family's estate. And since Daniel signed a prenuptial agreement that included an infidelity and moral turpitude clause, one his own lawyers approved, he leaves this room exactly as he arrived, with nothing." She looked at Daniel for a long, last moment. "You wanted to be the man everyone talked about in Lagos. Now you are. But the story isn't the one you wrote." Then she turned, walked down the aisle with her head straight and her shoulders back, and left the building without once looking behind her. Toby followed without a word. The remaining guests trickled out in stunned clusters, already texting, already narrating. The cleaning crew moved in before the last car had even left the car park. Daniel sat down on the steps of the altar. He didn't cry. He didn't make a call. He just sat there in the wreckage of the most expensive morning of his life, surrounded by untouched champagne flutes and a 5-tier cake that would never be cut. The lily still smelled expensive, the lights were still bright, and the silence was louder than anything that had been said. Lagos moved on outside the hotel walls. It always does. The city has no patience for personal tragedy. It has its own momentum, its own noise, its own next story to chase. Within hours, clips from the ballroom were trending. The tags wrote themselves, the comment sections were a battlefield of opinions. Who was the villain? Who was the victim? Whether Funke had gone too far or not far enough. The internet loved the spectacle of it. It fed on the complexity. It gorged on the wreckage. But the wreckage was a man sitting alone on a church step in a designer suit, and no algorithm captured what that actually looked like. Months later, the story had found its permanent shape in the city's memory. Funke had relocated to London. She gave no interviews, she posted no explanations, she simply disappeared from the version of Lagos that had tried to swallow her whole and rebuilt herself somewhere she owed nothing to anyone. Those who knew her said she seemed lighter. Toby quietly withdrew from the social circuit too. No dramatic announcement, no goodbye post, just a gradual absence, and then the slow, private work of becoming someone whose life belonged entirely to himself. Daniel was still in Lagos. He was seen in parts of the city he would never have been caught in before. Quieter areas, smaller offices, ordinary afternoons. His name, when it came up as a lesson, a cautionary tale for people who confuse performing a life with actually living one. The video never disappeared. That's the thing about the internet. It archives everything. Years from now, someone will stumble across the clip, watch a man confess his whole life in front of 500 people, and feel the strange intimacy of watching a real thing fall apart in real time. They'll read the comments, they'll form an opinion about Funke, they'll wonder about Toby, they'll debate whether public humiliation is ever a legitimate form of justice, whether a person can redeem themselves after years of calculated deception, whether the people we lie to most consistently are always, at some level, the people we are most afraid to love honestly. These are not easy questions. There are no clean answers hiding at the bottom of a comment section. What the story leaves behind is simpler and more brutal than any verdict. Daniel had every opportunity across 5 full years to be honest when it cost him something real. He waited until he had no other choice, until the cameras were rolling and the exits were covered, and the only move left was the truth. And even then, even in his confession, you couldn't be entirely sure how much was courage and how much was just survival instinct wearing courage's face. That is the question that follows you after the screen goes dark. If you were standing on that altar with your whole constructed world about to come apart, and the only person asking you to be honest was someone you had already broken, would you speak? Not to save yourself, not because you were cornered, but because the truth was the only thing you had left that was actually yours. Lagos is a city that loves a good story, but it never forgets a betrayal. And the people who survive it, the ones who walk out the side door with their heads held high, or who quietly disappear to rebuild somewhere no one knows their name, those people didn't win because they were perfect. They won because they stopped waiting for someone else to set them free.